So if you're someone who really values your digital privacy, chances are you've put your faith in a secure messaging app at some point.
Oh, absolutely.
You might be, organizing a meeting, sharing sensitive research, or if you're an anti-government activist, maybe you're just trying to stay safe under a pretty tough regime.
Right, you're relying on that little padlock icon.
Exactly. You're relying on it to keep your conversation shielded.
And it's more than just reliance, isn't it? It's become an absolute necessity for any kind of modern organizing. And for years, especially for those in, let's say, politically restrictive places, specifically Russian anti-war activists, there was one platform that was the clear choice.
Telegram.
Telegram. Its reputation was, it was like a digital fortress. And that was built on the anti-authoritarian, almost heroic image of its founder, Pavel Durov.
So after the Kremlin banned or, compromised other platforms, Telegram wasn't just an option.
No, it became the last perceived safe oasis.
But this is where it gets really strange. The reality on the ground has become this central, deeply unsettling mystery. Because despite this seemingly unassailable security, Russian authorities appear to know everything.
And we're not talking about generalized knowledge here. This isn't just knowing who the activists are.
No. We're talking about security officers quoting exact messages written in private Telegram chats, quoting them back to the activists during an interrogation.
Which just shouldn't be possible.
It fundamentally shouldn't be possible in a service that's supposed to be secure. It suggests a systemic level of access.
And that's the core of this deep dive. Our mission is to move past the speculation. We are going to unpack the technical infrastructure, we're going to dissect the political shifts, and look at the hard evidence from recent investigations to see exactly how this secure space might have been compromised.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because this isn't a simple story about, one corrupt employee or a lucky hack.
Not at all. We are exploring a whole constellation of vulnerabilities. It starts deep down at the structural network level.
And it moves up through flaws in the protocol itself.
And ends with a very, very concerning political détente between Durov and the Kremlin. This is a story that doesn't just affect Russian dissidents. It affects anyone, anywhere, who relies on Telegram.
So to really get the scale of this, we have to start at the beginning. We have to understand the myth of Telegram.
To grasp the magnitude of the compromise, you have to. You have to appreciate the founding narrative, because that story is the very foundation of its security claims.
And that story starts with one person, Pavel Durov.
He's often presented as this quasi-mythological figure, right? The charismatic, fiercely independent entrepreneur.
He was called Russia's Mark Zuckerberg for a while.
Right, before he became this anti-Putin crusader. His first big thing was VKontakte, launched in 2006. It dominated the Russian social network scene.
But then, around 2012, as the state control in Russia really started to harden, opposition groups were using VKontakte all the time to organize these huge anti-government protests.
And that's where Durov really earned his reputation for defiance. The authorities came to him and demanded he ban these opposition groups, shut down their pages.
And he refused.
Famously refused. He later talked about how armed police officers literally showed up at his home because of it, and he claimed that moment, that pressure from the state, is what made him realize he needed to build a truly secure, uncompromisable messaging platform.
So that was the kernel of the idea for Telegram.
That was the kernel. And the pressure just got worse. 2 years later, 2014, the Kremlin demands he hand over personal data of Ukrainian protesters from the Maidan protests in Kyiv.
And again, he says no.
Again, he refuses. I said it would be treason to his users. So he sells his remaining stick in VKontakte, which of course was immediately snapped up by Kremlin-friendly entities.
Of course.
And he flees Russia. He even published this manifesto called 7 Reasons Not to Return to Russia.
So that dramatic exit really shaped the entire perception of Telegram.
Completely. It meant the platform was, ideologically opposed to the Russian security state and, crucially, physically removed from its jurisdiction. That history became its single most valuable asset. It cemented its reputation as being inherently safer than anything else.
And that reputation paid off hugely.
Oh, it exploded. Over 1 billion monthly active users. It perfectly captured that global privacy fatigue, the security concerns around its competitors.
I remember in January 2021 when WhatsApp updated its privacy policy about sharing data with Facebook.
That was the moment. Durov jumped on it. He called the mass migration to Telegram possibly the largest digital migration in human history. And he was probably right.
And he's been very careful to maintain this image.
Oh, incredibly diligent. Just last spring, he repeated his core claim. In its 12-year history, Telegram has never disclosed a single byte of private messages to governments. He points to the open source code as proof that, the app isn't doing anything behind your back.
But this is where we hit the crucial technical detail, the detail that most casual users miss, and the one that completely undermines that entire political promise.
And this is it. The core premise of security end-to-end encryption is not the default.
Which is, that's everything.
It is everything. When people talk about secure messengers, they mean end-to-end encryption, or E2EE, where only the sender and receiver can read the message.
Like on WhatsApp or Signal, where it's just on for all personal chats.
Exactly. They make it the default. Telegram does not. To get E2E on Telegram, you have to manually start what they call a secret chat.
And almost nobody does that.
The vast majority of users never do. So the standard day-to-day conversation, the one activists were relying on, it's happening in what Telegram calls cloud chats.
And cloud chat just means it's stored directly on Telegram's company servers.
Correct. And, Telegram tries to reassure people. They say the cloud data is split across multiple data centers in different jurisdictions, and the decryption keys are also split, so no single government can get in.
But that's a promise.
It's a promise. It's based on a reliance on company integrity, not mathematical certainty. And security experts all say the same thing. When encryption is not the default, and the platform itself holds the keys to the kingdom, you're just. You're hoping that company is politically and structurally bulletproof.
Because if they're compromised, or if one of those data centers is compromised,
the data is immediately exposed. And as we're about to see, betting on Durov's operational setup and his political resolve after 2020, that seems to have been a catastrophic mistake for the anti-war community.
So let's follow that trail. The trail of compromise leads us directly to the physical infrastructure.
It's a classic case. A seemingly global cloud-based app is only as secure as the physical wires and routers it travels over. And a huge investigation by the OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, they identified this critical hidden vulnerability right at the network level.
And they zeroed in on a name I'd certainly never heard before. A 45-year-old Russian network engineer, Vladimir Vidinav.
Totally unknown to the public. No public profile. But the evidence suggests he has near-exclusive operational control over Telegram's backbone.
So who is he?
He's the unseen player. He owns a company called Global Network Management, or GNM. And this company, GNM, maintains Telegram's networking equipment and assigns thousands, over 10,000 of its crucial IP addresses.
So when you trace the path of a Telegram message,
the trail very often ends at an address managed by Vidinav's company.
And we know this how? How deep is the connection?
It's incredibly deep. We have court records from a 2018 Florida dispute. It was between GNM and a contractor, and in them, Vidinav testified under oath. He said GNM was, and I'm quoting, involved in the installation of client equipment, in this case for the Telegram messenger, and further technical support of this equipment.
So he's admitting it on the record?
On the record. And even more, those documents revealed he had exclusive access to Telegram servers in a Miami data center. And crucially, he testified that his company, GNM, owned a router that was physically located in the Telegram server room.
Wait, hold on. His company owns the router that handles the traffic in and out of Telegram servers.
Yes.
Doesn't that grant an incredible, arguably excessive amount of power? That's physical control over the digital pipes.
It is absolute control over the data transmission channel. Now, in theory, the router shouldn't be able to read an end-to-end encrypted message, sure, but it can absolutely monitor every single piece of metadata associated with that traffic. The IP addresses, the timestamps, crucial identifiers we're going to talk about. This level of access is exactly what security experts warn can turn a messenger into a surveillance tool.
And the relationship between Vidinav and Durov itself seems bizarre.
Bizarre is a good word. The court materials show this arrangement was intimate and long-standing. Vidinav was empowered by Durov to sign documents on Telegram's behalf nearly a decade ago.
He was signing his telegram.
Yes. There was one contract where he signed twice. Once as the director of his own company, GNM, and right below that he signed again as Telegram's CFO.
He was the CFO of Telegram.
He described it as an informal arrangement, but admitted he had a formal power of attorney from Durov and Telegram.
So this just raises huge questions about governance, conflict of interest.
It's a massive question. Why would the founder of a supposedly anti-authoritarian platform grant such unilateral exclusive control, including financial and infrastructure authority, to a Russian network engineer whose other business interests are so deeply intertwined with the Kremlin security apparatus.
Okay, so that's the pivot point. Let's trace those interests.
Let's do it. Vedenev also founded GlobalNet, a St. Petersburg telecom operator, a big one. It manages 18,000 kilometers of infrastructure linking Siberia to Western Europe.
And the crucial part,
Until 2020, the Telegram IP addresses that are now managed by his company GNM, they were originally under the control of GlobalNet.
and who are GlobalNet's other clients?
Well, their client list reads like a who's who of the Russian security state. Among their most sensitive clients is a group called GLAV NEVTS.
GLAV and DTS, the main research computing center of the Presidential Property Management Department. That sounds deliberately opaque.
It's meant to. It's basically the tech development and data analysis arm for the Kremlin's intelligence services.
Let's pause on that name because it really hides its function. This isn't just some benign IT agency.
Not at all. Former employees confirmed to journalists this agency works directly for the FSB, the GRU, the Defense Ministry, the FSO, all of them.
What do they do for them?
Their function is terrifyingly relevant. They were involved in planning the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. But more importantly for this, they upgraded pro-Kremlin bot networks and, crucially, developed sophisticated mass data analysis tools.
Tools with names like Sherlock and PSCoV.
Right. They're basically the Russian equivalent of Western mass data analysis systems like Palantir, and their explicit purpose is to track and de-anonymize internet users.
So let me get this straight. The company that controlled Telegram's IP addresses until 2020 was founded by a man whose other company services the primary Russian agency that builds state surveillance tools used by the FSB to unmask critics.
It's an almost perfect storm of circumstantial evidence.
And it doesn't stop there.
No. GlobalNet also provides infrastructure to the Kurchatov Institute. That's a state-owned nuclear research lab led by Mikhail Kovalchuk, a key Putin ally, which is sanctioned by the U.S.
The commitment to state compliance at GlobalNet doesn't seem very subtle either.
Not at all. Shortly after the 2022 invasion, the company proudly announced it was the first Russian operator to fully implement Deep Packet Inspection, or DPI.
Okay, explain DPI for us.
So Deep Packet Inspection is sophisticated traffic analysis. It goes way beyond just looking at the header of a data packet. It analyzes the actual content and structure of the data itself.
And GlobalNet said they did this why?
Explicitly, according to Roskomnadzor rules. Roskomnadzor is the official internet regulator, and they use DPI precisely to monitor, filter, throttle, and surveil traffic. It's a direct countermeasure to any claim of privacy.
And the connections just keep going deeper, don't they? Back years.
They do. GlobalNet has this notable minority co-owner, a man named Roman Venediktov. He's an officer in the Russian Space Forces, served almost a decade in a Defense Ministry spacecraft testing center, deeply connected to the military-industrial complex.
And he also has ties to Durov.
Historical ties. He cooperated with the Durar family about 15 years ago. He was a co-owner of a company called Peering that handled traffic for vKontakte.
So this isn't a new relationship.
It establishes a long-running operational and maybe personal relationship between Durov, Vedenev, and a key Russian military officer. It just underscores that Telegram's infrastructure was managed by this very small, tightly knit group of Russian nationals who had existing state ties.
And then there's Electron Telecom.
Right. Another Vedenev-linked company that also assigned thousands of Telegram IP addresses. And here, reporters managed to get their hands on internal accounting documents for 2024.
And what do they show?
They eliminate all ambiguity. The internal records show, unequivocally, that one of Electron Telecom's most important government clients is the FSB.
Wow.
The documents specifically detail that Electron Telecom installs and manages surveillance equipment for FSB offices in St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region.
Okay, so that moves this from suspicion of ties to proof of active collaboration.
It does. If the person managing Telegram's core traffic infrastructure is simultaneously installing and maintaining surveillance equipment for the FSB, the agency that's actively hunting these anti-war activists, then the security claims of Telegram's infrastructure are, well, they're rendered meaningless.
And that physical control over the network leads us directly to the single biggest technical flaw in Telegram's protocol.
So when we talk about this physical infrastructure control, Vedenev owning the router, managing the IP addresses, the crucial question is, how does that translate into actual surveillance? Especially if an activist is using the secret chat feature.
Right, the end-to-end encrypted one.
And this is a critical point people misunderstand. They focus on the content, the text of the message, and they assume that if that's encrypted, they're safe.
But the real risk is the metadata.
The risk, especially when the network itself is compromised, is in monitoring the network traffic, the metadata, which is generally not encrypted, even in a secured chat.
So the man-in-the-middle threat here isn't necessarily about decrypting the sealed envelope. It's about reading the address on the outside and knowing exactly where and when it was sent.
That is the perfect analogy. Ukrainian IT specialists analyzing how the Russian military exploits captured networks confirmed this. Hackers prioritize metadata. Who is talking to whom, the exact time, the IP addresses, and the rough geographic location. If you control the router, you have physical access to the channel, and you can install whatever surveillance gear you want to harvest that specific information.
And this brings us to Telegram's Specific Encryption Protocol, MT-Proto, which has a fundamental vulnerability that can be exploited by someone like Vednev.
The flaw is in a specific unencrypted component that the protocol requires. Even when you're in a secret chat using E2E, the MT-Proto protocol attaches an unencrypted identifier to the beginning of every single message.
An identifier called the auth key.
The auth key, yes.
Okay, so let's use that lockbox analogy again. If the encrypted message is a heavily locked steel box, what is the auth key?
Think of it like a unique, unencrypted serial number stamped on the outside of the box. A serial number that corresponds directly and uniquely to your device and your Telegram account.
It's a device identifier that has to be sent in the clear.
It has to be so the Telegram servers know where to route the encrypted message. It's a fundamental part of how it works.
So what does this actually let an adversary like the FSB working through GlobalNet, what can they do with that?
Well, security specialists confirmed that if you were positioned to listen in on the network traffic, which Vednev's companies are, and you capture this auth key, you can absolutely identify the specific user device communicating with Telegram.
You might not know what they said.
You don't know the content, but you know that device A just sent a message to device B at 10:07 a.m.
And if you have that, you can cross-reference it with the IP address traveling through your router at that exact same time.
And instantly you have the user's rough geographic location, and you track that auth key and its associated IP addresses over time.
And you've built a powerful surveillance tool.
You've built a profile of movement, of communication patterns. They know your network, your location history, your contacts. This is why experts define this vulnerability as enabling global surveillance of messenger users. The metadata is no longer incidental, it becomes the primary weapon. And this method perfectly explains how an officer could know an activist was home before kicking down the door.
So we have this sophisticated network-level vulnerability. But Russian authorities don't always need complex man-in-the-middle attacks because Telegram's own public interface gives them another massive avenue for data collection.
This is the second huge exposure point. The application programming interface, the API. This is the toolkit that lets third parties interact with the platform.
Durov used to promote it as a sign of transparency.
He did, but it's been weaponized. It's become one of the most powerful tools for mass surveillance, and it often doesn't require any active, direct compromise from Telegram itself.
So how generous is this API compared to, say, WhatsApp?
It's extremely generous. Any user can request a key and basically plug into the platform. Once they're connected, they can automatically save and catalog the text contents and metadata, every message, image, file from any public group chat or channel.
And they can see when users were last online?
Crucially, yes. This level of bulk data extraction and indexing is just not allowed on competing platforms.
So this allows for intelligence gathering on an industrial scale.
Absolutely. Elias Campo at Citizen Lab explained that with this API, intelligence authorities or even just pro-Kremlin vigilante groups can easily archive not just huge channels, but thousands of smaller, targeted groups.
And Telegram could stop this?
He noted they could impose barriers to limit this kind of scraping, like limiting the number of API calls a single user can make, but they've chosen not to.
The API also led to a really terrifying high-precision targeting vulnerability, the spoofed location risk.
At the start of the full-scale invasion, investigators found that if a user had enabled Telegram's Find People Nearby feature, the app was essentially broadcasting their position.
And a researcher named Jordan Wilden realized this feature could be easily manipulated.
He and his team did. And the practical implication was that they could pinpoint users within a 2-mile radius, often with frightening precision, sometimes down to a single yard.
And they demonstrated this near sensitive locations.
Yeah, near Chernobyl, right when Russian forces were mobilizing to seize the area. Now, Telegram later disputed the extreme accuracy and adjusted the code to make it less precise.
But it's still effective.
Wilden confirmed it's still highly effective. You can still track a location with an accuracy of around 600 yards. That's enough to know if a target is in a specific building or neighborhood.
So when you combine all this, experts believe that with enough state resources, servers, manpower, API keys, it's possible to archive nearly all public content on Telegram.
And that archiving effort is directly supported by third-party firms operating entirely within Russian jurisdiction. Take a firm called Takedown.
They provide metrics on Telegram channels.
Right. And they archive all publicly available data, sometimes for years, group memberships, channel histories, everything.
And their privacy policy is pretty clear about their obligations to the Kremlin.
Couldn't be clearer. TG-Stat explicitly states it is obliged by Russian law to hand over its data, its entire archived history, to Russian state authorities upon request.
So security forces don't even need to ask Telegram.
They don't. A vast, legally obtainable, pre-scraped database is already sitting there waiting for intelligence analysis.
And the Kremlin is actively funding new tech to process all this data.
Right. They projected spending around $425 million on systems to bolster internet infrastructure, focusing on tools that automatically search for illegal content and produce detailed user profiles.
We're talking about specific firms, like SUSLab.
A company that processes a staggering billion social networking pages and instant messages a day. Their goal is to create detailed, actionable profiles based specifically on a user's political activity.
So these aren't just keyword searches.
No, this is AI-driven analysis, tracking sentiment, connection mapping, behavioral markers, all to assess a user's loyalty or dissent.
It sounds like a highly efficient surveillance pipeline.
It is. The generous API provides the raw data. State-linked companies like TG-Stat index it, and then state contractors like SUSLab process it into intelligence reports, allowing investigators to identify targets at scale.
And once a target is flagged in a public group,
They move to the next phase. They don't need a backdoor to the private chats. They just deploy undercover agents or informants to pursue the target into private channels using de-anonymization tools. It's a standard tactic.
so Durov's entire reputation was built on this story of defiance. But that defiance was expensive.
It was, and we need to look very closely at the financial event that seems to have fundamentally shifted Telegram's relationship with the Kremlin, turning it from a resistance hero into a key strategic asset.
Right. So the peak of his resistance was 2018.
April 2018. He refuses the FSB's demand for encryption keys. The Kremlin responds by banning the service, and Roskomnadzor launches this full-scale, clumsy attempt to block Telegram.
I remember this. They were blocking millions of IP addresses.
And Telegram just played digital cat and mouse, constantly hopping between hosting services like Google and Amazon. Roskomnadzor ended up accidentally blocking huge parts of the Russian internet, but Telegram stayed accessible.
Which made Durov look like a hero.
The anti-authoritarian victor. But that victory came at the exact moment Telegram was facing a catastrophic financial collapse.
He needed money to fund all this.
Soaring server costs, exacerbated by having to constantly jump between hosts. So he launched the Telegram Open Network, or TON, this hugely ambitious blockchain and crypto project.
And the initial coin offering was a massive success. It raised $1.7 billion.
Staggering amount. But it was short-lived. In 2019, the US SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, stepped in. They declared the cryptocurrency was an unregistered security and shut the whole project down.
And this is where the financial pressure becomes existential.
Completely. Durov was forced to pay back that entire $1.7 billion to investors. At the same time, his server costs were just astronomical. He needed a massive influx of cash to keep the lights on.
So what was the impact of having to repay $1.7 billion while your costs are skyrocketing? I mean, did this make him desperate enough to change his entire political stance?
The timing strongly suggests that desperation led to a political pivot. In June 2020, just weeks after the Takedown project officially collapsed and he had to start repayments, Russia suddenly and mysteriously unblocked Telegram.
And the official reason was vague.
Very vague. Something about terrorism concerns and Durov supposedly improving his methods for detecting and removing extremist propaganda.
But the actual terms of this sudden détente were never disclosed.
Never. Human rights groups immediately suspected a secret deal had been struck. Now, Telegram maintains the unblocking was made solely by the authorities in Russia with no deal.
But government sources said something different.
Unnamed government sources told a Russian state news agency that Telegram had agreed to cooperate with security services in specific cases, a clear trade-off.
And then the money trail seems to back that up.
The financial and political synchronization that followed strongly suggests a quid pro quo. In 2021, Telegram raises over $1 billion from a mix of sovereign wealth funds. And crucially, 75 million of that came from a joint partnership between an Abu Dhabi state fund and a Kremlin sovereign wealth fund.
A lifeline directly connected to Putin's government. Yeah.
And the Kremlin's political blessing followed immediately. Prime Minister Mishustin and Deputy PM Chernyshenko publicly promoted Telegram, emphasizing its Russian roots, recommending government agencies create accounts.
And Putin himself celebrated it on live TV.
A huge propaganda moment, his annual Q&A session, he told the nation, "We have reached an agreement with Telegram. You can see that everything is working fine."
That endorsement basically transformed Telegram into a strategic national asset.
Right. We also see direct involvement from state-owned banks like VTB, which has very close ties to the Kremlin. They were reportedly involved in negotiating the bonds that helped finance Telegram after the détente.
And then after the 2022 invasion, when Western sanctions hit, VTB launched a digital bank on Telegram to get around Apple and Google removing their apps.
The strategic benefit for the Kremlin post-invasion is just undeniable. After they banned Facebook and Instagram and systematically crushed independent media, Telegram was deliberately left standing. It became the essential communication channel for the state.
Jonas Sartz, the director of the NATO Stratcom Center of Excellence, he noted that Telegram quickly became the central backbone for Russian disinformation machinery.
So the platform that was once the symbol of defiance now effectively serves the regime as its primary propaganda tool. It's too valuable for them to shut down.
And the chilling reality of all this compromise, it's measured in the human cost, the arrests, the interrogations of activists who trusted that original promise.
We have multiple documented cases where the compromise is just terrifyingly direct.
Let's talk about the arrest of Marina Metsapolina. She was the vice chair of Russia's Libertarian Party.
She was arrested in February 2022, right after the invasion began, on this dubious charge of a false bomb threat.
And the officer questioning her. He made a point of showing what they knew.
He did. When she sort of feigned ignorance about how they found her, he just dispassionately recited a message she had written hours earlier in a highly restricted, private Telegram chat with only 7 close friends.
They're unlikely to bust it down, he quoted.
And then he smirked and added, "And so we knew that you were there."
A direct quote from a private chat. That's the smoking gun. It proves either Telegram cooperated or the FSB surveillance tools are so advanced that they can breach the protocol.
Right. Metsapolina herself considered, expensive Pegasus malware, but also the possibility of direct Telegram cooperation.
What was Telegram's official response?
They suggested a third option, that FSB officers used a phone hacking tool like Celebrate to quickly extract messages from her locked phone after they seized it.
But the timing doesn't fit. He quoted her when he arrived, before they seized the device.
Exactly. The information preceded the seizure, and the context supports deeper penetration. She later remembered seeing an unmarked truck with a dome on its roof, the kind used for electronic warfare or mobile hacking parked outside her apartment, just before the police stormed in.
And then there's the infiltration factor.
It's crucial. Take the case of Richard Rose, a music producer arrested for criticizing the atrocities in Bucha. He was messaging on Telegram about evacuating his family. He later suspected his contacts were actually FSB officers, inducing him to commit a terrorist act, a common entrapment technique.
And the FSB got a court order to monitor his messages.
Which Telegram denies facilitating, but which surveillance tech linked to Gleb NIVTS could absolutely provide.
But the suspicion goes even deeper, to the secret chats themselves, the ones that are supposed to be ironclad.
This is what's profoundly disturbing. Activists like Amalia Kurbatova and her partner Ivan Astashin reported these very strange technical anomalies.
What kind of anomalies?
They found that their highly sensitive, end-to-end encrypted secret chats were being marked as read even when the recipient hadn't opened the message yet.
That's not supposed to happen.
It's highly irregular. And even stranger, they noticed that old, logged-out sessions could be inexplicably reopened and accessed.
But that should be technically impossible.
It should be impossible if the encryption is working correctly. In a true E2E system, the unique key for that session is destroyed when you log out. The fact that sessions seem to persist and be accessed by a third party, it suggests a deep structural compromise that bypasses the supposed safeguards.
So what stands out to you when you review all these cases? The infrastructure, the politics, the metadata flaw, these weird anomalies.
For the Russian opposition movement, the only reasonable conclusion was a total, irretrievable collapse of trust. They realized they were exposed on every single level.
Whether it was metadata theft, API scraping, informant infiltration, or a compromise at the server level.
The platform was just no longer safe.
And the result was this dramatic digital migration.
Experts note the majority of significant Russian opposition organizing just abandoned Telegram entirely. Those who could, they moved out of the country and simultaneously out of Telegram in exile. No major anti-government organizing has been attempted on the platform since February 2022.
And we should also note, Telegram has shown it's willing to negotiate its privacy claims elsewhere when the pressure is on.
Absolutely. They've cooperated with other governments. In Germany, they've provided personal data of users suspected of terrorism and child abuse. In India, they provided names, phone numbers, and IP addresses of users accused of copyright infringement.
So this proves the company isn't impervious to government pressure.
No, it just chooses when and where to cooperate.
So when you synthesize all of this, the financial pressure of 2020, the direct infrastructure ties to the FSB through Vedeniev, the metadata flaw, the generous API, the whole narrative of Telegram as an uncompromisable safe space it completely evaporates.
Let's synthesize the complexity here. The exposure of these anti-war activists, it wasn't one simple event. It was a catastrophic failure across 4 interconnected domains that enabled mass surveillance.
Okay, so first, the political compromise. The Kremlin offered Telegram a financial lifeline right after Durov's $1.7 billion crypto project collapsed, forcing the suspicious détente in 2020.
Right, which secured Telegram's place as a critical communication tool for the state, making it politically protected but operationally compromised.
Second, the infrastructure compromise. Critical Telegram network control was delegated to these third-party Russian firms, GNM and Electron Telecom, controlled by Vladimir Vedeniev.
Firms that simultaneously service and install surveillance equipment for the FSB.
Third, the protocol vulnerability. End-to-end encryption is not the default. And even in secret chats, that unencrypted auth key provides a unique device identifier,
Which enables state actors with network access to monitor who is talking to whom from where and when.
And fourth, surveillance at scale. The overly generous API allows state agencies and compliant firms like TG-Stat to archive and index massive amounts of public activity.
Generating detailed political profiles that become the intelligence service's targeting mechanism.
So trusting Telegram means trusting not just the ideology of Pavel Durov, but also trusting that his associated, largely unknown network partners who have direct contracts with the Russian security services will somehow prioritize his ideals over their state ties.
So if the integrity of a communication platform is ultimately defined not just by its cryptographic strength, but by the operational environment of its physical infrastructure and the political resilience of its management, what does that mean for any application whose physical backbone or key operational partners touch authoritarian or surveillance states? You can use the most sophisticated encryption in the world, but if the state knows the unique serial number of your transmission and your location history, the metadata, not the message, is often the real vulnerability. That's something you should be thinking about the next time you initiate a secure chat.